What this is about, it's an overview of the stuff I'm involved in, like work standards, job instruction, job relations, that sort of thing, and how it all fits together as part of the story way. So that's the first part. That'll take about 3/4 of an hour. And then the last bit is, for those of you who have participated in job relations, there's now a storyized job relations card. There's a bit of a backstory as to how that come about. So Russ will give you that backstory, and then we've got the new cards here, and we'll swap them over. And those of you who've got the old ones. So that'll be the last bit, will be the last 1/4 of an hour. More you ask questions through this, rather than it be a lecture, the better it will go, and the more meaningful it'll be for everyone. What I will do is the model is going to end up in 2 halves. There's going to be this half of the whiteboard and that half of the whiteboard, this model that we'll illustrate. Once I've got this half done, I'm going to ask someone to explain it back to the group. So once we've done this half, I'll get someone to explain it back. And then once I've done this half, I'll get a second person, different person to explain that back. So be ready for that, please, because it might be you. All right, to get started, Scott, could you read that red poster to us, please?
If you don't have a clear expectation of what good looks like, then your definition of not good is subjective and varies depending on who, what, and when things are being looked at.
Good, thank you. Instances of that in the last month or so in your work, in the work that you've done, examples of where that's happened, where there's been varying interpretations of not good in your workspace. Any examples?
Well,
Good on you. Thanks, John.
Pretty significant quality issues out at our project, and we had to revisit what was specified in the project manual to reassign or reevaluate what good and not good.
Righto, so there was various interpretations of the word quality, or was it yeah, right, excellent. Well, not good, but great example. Another one?
Timing is ours, getting the owner to make decisions and get change requests.
Righto, so the red poster issue is lack of clarification of timing.
Yeah.
Righto, thanks. There's, in the red book, we noted when I was out at GRS late last week, that there's a statement in the red book that says, it refers to a high quality work zone. What's the problem with that statement? Subject to interpretation. High quality work zone, subject to interpretation. We can get 8 different people to assess a work zone and get 8 different responses, for sure. So that's a good example of what we mean by red poster. Were you going to add something, Randy? No. When we've got red poster situations, what's the human status? In other words, how are people feeling? Yep. What else?
Confused.
Yep. Any others you want to add? You're on the right track.
Maybe attacked.
Pardon?
Attacked.
Oh, I've never had that one before, but I understand exactly what you're saying. Well done. Thanks, Weston.
Are you okay?
Thank you.
Like that, we're projecting through some of our stuff.
Yeah, right. Makes sense. Thank you. So, the opposite to the red poster is the green poster. So can someone other than Scott read me that? Would you like to have a crack, please?
If you do have a clear expectation of what good or normal looks like, then your definition of not good, abnormal, is objective and saying no matter who, what, and when things are being done.
Good. So that's the 180-degree opposite of that. How do we bridge? In what way are we aiming to bridge that gap at story? What are we using? What principles of what? Work standards. Very good. Thank you. And what's the primary function of a work standard? To do what? Establish normal. Yep, establish normal. So primary function of a work standard is to establish normal. And what's the definition of normal? How do we define normal? Normal is the what? No, the work standard established. We haven't quite got there yet. So normal is what? It describes the acceptable standard. And the other point is it's predetermined. So we're not determining it on the fly when we're stuck here. It's the predetermined acceptable standard. So we consider the work zone and we spend time identifying what we mean by high quality. So normal is the predetermined acceptable standard. What was the word you used again?
Expectation.
Yep. Standard / expectation. Spot on. When I was out at the Strand this morning, when I walked in at 7:30, Steve and Matt and someone else were talking about drawings that you guys get from architects. And I was listening to the conversation. Why are you grinning? You know where this is going?
Yeah, I do. No,
Right.
I mean, it's Steve, yeah.
Right.
I talked to him about it last week.
And I said, isn't there a standard way of isn't there a standard draw? No, right. That was the response I got. Is there not a standard drawing or a standard expectation for the way Story receives their drawings in? No, they come in a variety of shapes and sizes and detail, and it's all. And I'm thinking, because this was what was happening. They were having a red poster discussion. It was classic red poster discussion. Root cause being drawings come in all shapes and sizes.
There are architectural standards, we just rarely get them that meet.
Sure. So there's not. I said, is there a Story internal standard for the way you get drawings in? So what I saw was this. What I heard in the conversation was that, not that. That, certainly that. And there was a 10-minute conversation about it. So it illustrated the point. So established normal is the goal of a work standard, and normal is the predetermined acceptable standard or expectation. So someone touched on it, that we develop them in a specific order. First of all, we start with the output standard. In other words, I'm going to use the work zone as the theme to illustrate. Before we go anywhere, we first determine what a good work zone looks like. So what are the elements of a work zone and what's quality for those? What are the quality parameters? So we establish normal for the output for the work zone for itself. Then, if there is a machine, which there often isn't, and with construction, but there might be when we get more into the construction field, is that if there's we call them process standards. In manufacturing, they will inevitably be a machine, but in non-manufacturing, they can be something like an agenda. For example, when we did the crew workflow plans at one of the high schools, we had to identify the output standard for a good crew workflow plan, and then the process standard was the agenda part of the meeting, which drives towards that. Then the third one is the person standard. The logic is we start with the end in mind. What are the process variables, and we establish normal for them. What are the process variables, and we establish normal for them. Then we come up with a person standard, which describes normal for what the person does. The logic is then if the person does normal, the process will be normal, and if the process is normal, we'll get normal in the output. So we've moved from there towards there. So the sequence of developments that way. We start with the end in mind. The doing of it is the person does what that says, which will give that, which will end up with normal in the output. In Story's case, often that isn't there. So we're starting with the output standard, being clear on that, and then what does the person do to deliver that output? So an example of that, Jeff, on the ones you've worked with, what's an example of one of the ones you've worked on where you've had those two?
It's like on the so let's say on the crane erection
Ah, yeah.
standard. So specific, one of the things that they have to do is, how would they say, lower the boom, there needs to be some dunnage. And so, if you would say if it is in the correct position, you would need to, the work standard would provide the steps in which, how to lower the boom.
That's
to the
good.
dunnage to get to the output.
The output we're looking for is what does good look like for a lowered crane. Then we'll describe how the human's going to get there. So probably 80% of the story work standard development is going to be output to person. There might be a few of those in there. So develop that way, because we start with the end in mind, and then you do it that way. So develop that way, human does it, and then the human does this, it will give us that if there is one. If there isn't, then if human does this, normal, then we will get normal in the output. That's the logic. I'm just marking off as I go to make sure I cover everything. Now, the important question is, do we apply work standards everywhere in the organisation tomorrow? No, not everywhere tomorrow. So you're spot on. There's a driving statement that can help us grasp where to apply work standards, and that's this: master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. So master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. What do you think that's getting at? Master the tiniest item. In other words, someone put it in their own words. Master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. Yes, a little bit of hesitancy there. Force multiply, what do you mean? You're on the right track, but what else?
Least amount of effort to drive the greatest result.
Yeah, so quite often, why do you think work zone is one of the points of focus? It seems like a tiny item, perhaps, but why might that be of the highest importance?
Most efficiency from it.
Yeah, and how many times can that that's a multiplier. Yeah. In other words, we get it right, we understand it and get it right. Beg your pardon?
Yeah, we're doing it every day.
Yeah, constantly and across all sites. So it's got a multiplier across all sites. So why was the cranes chosen?
It is one of the more risky operations that we do, and so safety was a big concern.
Highest importance. The reality is if we get that wrong, we might kill someone. So it's of the highest importance. Tiny item may seem, but it's of the highest importance. So in terms of this master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result, where do we go with this? Where do we know we have red poster issues that are a risk to the business from a quality, safety or productivity point? So where do we know we have red poster, where we've got evidence of that, and we know that it's either a risk to the business now or it will be if we don't get on top of it. So master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. All right, at this point now, what do we have? What do we have? We've got to this point on a particular item of the highest importance. So what do we actually have at this point? Is there any behaviour change yet? No, we just have what? Documents. So we just have the work standards. We haven't got anything else yet. So that's what this side of the board's about. So can someone please explain what their interpretation of what I've said and what they see on the board? Because that's the left side of the board. Who wants to have a crack? Not Jeff. He's one of the trainers. Huh?
I can.
I know you can. I hope you can, because you're one of the trainers. If you can't, I've got a problem. I have a problem if Jeff couldn't. So that's why I'm not picking him. Who wants to have a go? Someone, or I'll volunteer. I'll volunteer. Want to have a crack?
No.
If whoever does it doesn't explain it well, who's accountable for that? Me. So if you don't get it quite right, it's me who's accountable for that, not you. So if you want to make a complete fool of me, say it and make a mess of it. Come on, someone, Shane. Good on you.
So our intention is to get to normal across the company. And so what's the process or practices that we can do to get there? And we utilize the work standard in that practice in order to get consistency and normal across different factions.
And what's the development path, Shane? What was that point with the development path? Here, what was the point I was making there? In developing work standards. Anyone else? If you're not sure, then someone else have a crack. You
start out with the output, what you want for, you establish what you want for the output, and then you determine what the process is and document the person standards, and then the implementation of it starts with the person through the process to get to the end result.
Good. So we start with the end in mind. Good. Righto. That's the first. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Or questions on what we've got so far? There's not much new there or different. To those of you who've been involved in work standards, there's nothing new there yet. Nothing new there. Just a point, it's not necessarily across the whole company. It may be in 10 years' time, but to start with, it's mastering the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. So what we said was that at the end of this exercise, for cranes or work zone or whatever it may be, we have work standards established. We have documents established, or some standard in some form.
Yeah, one thing I would maybe add.
Please, Jeff.
would be, on your comment that 3 different people think they understand what the expectation is, but this is a way in which we can commonly communicate what the expectation is. I feel like a lot of times, people think they know what they need to do or what the expectation is, and then we get different results, but then we have a problem communicating what the end result needs to be, or come to a consensus on what that end result.
Yeah, you don't go beyond the fact that we've got different expectations. Is that what you mean?
So in the end, we do have different expectations.
That's right.
We think that we don't.
Ah, okay.
And this is a way in which to communicate what those expectations are.
Yeah, so in other words, we've got hidden red posters almost. They're not obvious, but they're there.
They're there.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. All right, let's move on to this side of the board. So we have standards in place. We have standards. What needs to happen to them? 2 things needs to happen, and this needs to be driven by the level above where the work is happening. So if the standard is written about work at this level of the organisation, then the level immediately above, the people I'm referring to, the level immediately above need to be doing basically 2 things. So if the standard exists in at this level in the organisation, then the level above needs to be basically doing 2 things. If the standard's this level in the organisation, the level above needs to be basically doing 2 things. And they're both built around, what do you reckon is going to go in there? PDCR. They're both built around PDCR, plan, do, check, reflect. So these 2 things are, first one is build adherence to work standards, because remember, all we have is a standard. It's not out there, so the level above, and anyone can take photos of this, by the way, at the end. So the standards are there, they're not out there with the people. So we've got to build adherence to work standards. Build adherence to work standards. And the second thing, and we'll elaborate more on that. And the second thing is we need to problem solve, or that level above needs to problem solve abnormal. So by define, I missed a point actually, or did I? If we've defined, yes I did, if we've defined normal, we've defined normal in our work standards, do we need to define abnormal?
Now, I'd say no, abnormal.
Well said, Wes. Well said. Why, Wes? You're right. Why?
We've already defined it.
By default.
Yeah.
Yes, so we've defined abnormal by default. If we define normal in our standards, by default, everything else is abnormal. And that's always the way it should be viewed. So when we've done this, we need to problem solve abnormal because we will get them. Because it's not perfect. We've defined a normal, that does not mean we're going to get them. It's not perfect. So we need to problem solve abnormal. When we get an abnormal situation in this environment, is it good or bad? Assuming the building is not burning down. It's good. Why, Randy? Spot on.
Because it changes. You gotta go back and look at it and figure out what your normal is. Things will change, so normal could become abnormal.
Yeah, what does abnormal is an opportunity to do what? Improve. Yeah. So the abnormals that become that we need to problem solve, were they present here? Were they there? Absolutely they were. But what was the problem? Can't see them. So the abnormals that we're talking about here, they were there, but you can't see them. Now we can see them. When we're in that environment, we will see them. Through this, we will see them, and that's a good thing because now we can do something about it. When you're in red poster zone, abnormals, they're there, but you don't see them. When you're in green poster zone, they're there and you see them, and that should be celebrated because now you can do something about it. So that's why these two are, in getting these out, being used and live and come to life, two things: build adherence to work standards and problem solve abnormal. Let's expand on that one. So building adherence to work standards, the level above where the work's happening, in other words the leader, will run into two main obstacles. What do you reckon they are? So a lack of adherence, there will be two main obstacles.
Don't know.
Yep. Oh, hold on. Don't know and? Or?
Don't want to.
Were. Almost. You're a step ahead. Hold on. So don't know, that's all right.
Sorry.
So don't know, can't do is a obvious obstacle the leader's going to run into. And someone said it. What's the countermeasure skill? Someone said it, I heard it. Train. Did you say? Train. So the countermeasure skill is training. So there's the obstacle, that's the countermeasure skill, is training. At Story Construction, what's the routine that we're using to develop that skill? It's in its early days, but it's started. I don't think anyone in this room's participated. Do you know? Yeah. Huh? Yeah, you have. Yes, you have. So, yes, job instruction. So job instruction is the routine that Story has chosen. It's the routine that Story has chosen to develop the skill of training. Once we have the skill of training, then we've got a remedy to don't know, can't do, which will be necessary because we've established the standards. People may not know of them. So they don't know, can't do, they'll need to be trained. Job instruction is the routine that will be used to develop the skill of training. All good training will have 4 components. So all good training will have 4 components, and that is tell, show, illustrate, and practice. So all good training, regardless of the routine that's used, if it's going to be good, any training interaction where we've got a high chance of success, we'll have tell, show, illustrate and practice. In other words, I'll tell you how to do it, I will show you how to do it, I will use examples of what good looks like for illustration, and then I'm going to ask you to practice. So job instruction is the routine Story is chosen to help develop the skill of training, to make sure we have those elements built in whenever we have a training interaction. So that's one of the obstacles, of the two main obstacles that frontline leaders will run into when they're building adherence to work standards. What's the other one? And it's already got mentioned. So the person does know they can, but I'll just expand on that. But isn't. Yeah. So I got really badly caught with that at De Bortoli's about 12 or 14 years ago, where I wrote, does know, can, but doesn't care. And there was a middle-level manager in the room who was in that, who was not doing something they knew how to do, and they knew how to do it and they could do it, but they weren't doing it, and they grabbed me afterwards, a lady, and said, Oscar, it's not because I don't care. I know how to do it, I can do it, but I'm not doing it because I don't care. And I thought, and that was a lesson to me. She then told me why she wasn't doing it, and that was a lesson, never write that again, because sometimes there can be reasons. Now, it may well be a care factor. It may well be a care factor, but it may not. I'll go into that a little bit more. What's the countermeasure skill when we've got a does know, can, but isn't? Starts with L. It's part of it. It's a big part of it. Leadership, leading. Leading or leadership. That's the countermeasure skill. When someone can, they know, but they're not, then the countermeasure skill is leadership. By definition. So a leader by definition has what? If I'm a leader, that implies that by definition I have what? Followers. By definition. So if I have someone following me, they know and they can and they are. If they're not following me, they know and they can and they're not. They're not doing it. It isn't. So a leading or leadership, by definition, a leader has followers. What's the skill that's being practiced, or the routine, sorry. What's the routine that's being practiced at Story to help develop leading and leadership?
JR.
Well done. Job relations. So, routine to develop a skill, so we have a countermeasure as we to that problem of building it when we're building adherence. Routine to develop the skill of training, which is a countermeasure to that, which will be one of the two main things we run into. Now, in terms of the but isn't, just to cover that off quickly, in terms of the but isn't, one of the reasons for but isn't, and this was what caught me at De Bortoli's 14 years ago, was it was very hard. The task was very hard, or in that case, complicated. So when we understand the human and why they're not, it can sometimes be that it's very hard or complicated. So when we have that as an obstacle, the skill is improve the work. In other words, change the way the work's done. So if the leader through JR discovers that it's hard or complicated, this is a summary situation, then the skill is improve the work. Now, this is in its very early days at Story, but what's the routine that's starting to be practiced to help the improve the work bit? It's only happening at GRS as I understand it. What? What's the... No. Job instruction, job relations, and a lot of you may not be aware of it, but it's work methods. Work methods. The Storyized version of job methods. So, if we have countermeasure skills, those 3 countermeasure skills will be able to address 95% of the reasons for lack of adherence or the opportunity to build adherence. So these routines help with developing those skills which help with those countermeasures. Any thoughts on what's up there so far?
When I was thinking of listen, it was because if they are truly people that are following you or willing to follow you and they're not doing this, there could be several different reasons. This would be one, but what about they perceive it to be low value work? And
Sure.
now you got to find out, maybe they're correct or maybe they don't understand why it isn't, and then it's back to training again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we start here and we use the job relations, in that case, how to handle a problem side, to understand the problem, and then we've got possible actions. Where it will duck down is if by getting the facts, we learn that the job's a pain in the ass and really hard to do, and I wouldn't be doing it either if it was me. I'd be taking shortcuts. That's when we can jump in to improve the work. But through the problem handling side of the JR card, that's where we'll learn this stuff. Through get the facts is when we'll learn, and then our options come up. Good point. Any other questions so far on what I've done up to date there? So that's building adherence to work standards, because we have them, so we need to build adherence. Then we've got problem solve abnormal. The countermeasure skill to that in broad terms is scientific thinking, in broad terms. Scientific thinking in broad terms. What's the routine you've been practicing as long as any of the others here at Story that helps develop scientific thinking? Well done. Kata is a routine you practice to develop the skill of scientific thinking, which will help you get good at problem solving abnormal. That one is clearly PDCR. These two are both PDCR because we will plan to train someone, as we've done today for Strand tomorrow. Then we'll do it. Then we're going to check. So we're practicing applying that tomorrow at Strand on steel erection. We've planned it. It's now planned. We're going to do it tomorrow. We'll check to see what happened, and we're going to learn something, I'll guarantee it. We'll reflect, and we may need to go around again or do some form of adjustment. Job relations is very much plan, do, check, reflect. Now, there's the flaw so far in this that is it implies that job relations only appears once you've got to this point, is the flaw so far. So I'm going to add something to this, is that something sits around the whole lot that's critical. None of this will get far at all if there's not something being developed alongside, and it starts with T and it's a 5-letter word. Anyone want to? Well done. So none of this will develop long-term and stick long-term if alongside we're not developing trust. What have you got available to you? Those of you who have participated so far, and that's a lot of you. What have you got available to you that will help you build trust? The clue's over here somewhere. Yes. Which side? Yeah. Which side?
Foundations.
Well done. JR Foundations. Practicing the JR Foundations builds trust. Practicing the JR Foundation side builds trust, and it will increase the chances of followers following you. And that trust is something that will be needed all the way through here. So there's a bit of a misconception without that job relations only pops in later, but it doesn't, it pops in right at the start, which is one of the reasons that story started, the first thing we did here when I started coming here was getting job relations going. Why? Because this stuff is really hard to get going and make stick if that's not being developed at the same time. And it's not saying that there was or is low trust. If you work to build and improve trust, then your chances of this sticking and working can go up significantly. Oh, sorry, there's another one that goes in scientific thinking, and that's some of you may have been involved in the skill of doing a workplace experiment. Some of you done that. So the other one that goes in there is workplace experimenting. And Mitch, you're nodding, so there's a quest that helps with that, a routine in the quest, which is essentially PDCR, which is PDCR, no essential about it. All right, very close to the summary of this. Our hypothesis is this: if we do this well, when we do this well, what will you get? What will end up starting to happen? So when this gains momentum, and it's gaining momentum, what will start to happen? What will you get in the work in your workplace, in your areas of work? What will you start to get? Starts with S. Second letter's T. Third letter's A. Fourth letter's B. Stability. Yeah. So you'll start to get stability. And what will stability look like? You'll have adherence to standards. You'll have adherence to standards. You'll be very good at problem solving. Very good at problem solving abnormal. Because it doesn't mean it won't happen. It will happen, but what you'll become is very, very good at problem solving abnormal. So it doesn't mean it'll go away. Not in the medium term. Very good at problem solving abnormal. And the last thing is you'll start to be masters at the work. So masters of your work. Masters of your work. In other words, to put it in construction terms, you'll be the best in the business at steel erection, and you'll be the best in the business at laying concrete walls, and you'll be the best in the business at planning. So if you stick at this, you'll get adherence to standards, very good at problem solving abnormal, and you'll be masters of the work. And if that happens, what will you have more of? And it comes back to Story's vision. Well done. More good days. All right. Who's going to have a crack at explaining the right side of the board? And Jeff, you can pipe up in this situation if you wish, if you would like it to be you. But I'd prefer if it wasn't. Someone else have a crack at it? Scott, how confident do you feel about having a crack? Okay. Mitch, you're going to have a crack? I know you've already been here. John, come on.
Is an overview of how leaders can problem solve normal and abnormal, problem solve abnormal, and build adherence to work standards to produce better results.
So building adherence to work standards will create, you're going to run into two main obstacles being?
People that don't know and can't, and
Yep.
people that know but aren't.
Good. And what are these two things here? These three, they are? Anyone?
Tactics to solve the two issues.
They're routines. Yeah, they're routines that if you practice a routine enough, what will happen? Yeah, it'll become habit. Who plays sport? Who has played sport in their time? So what was the sport, Mitch?
Golf.
Okay, so if you want to get better at it, what do?
Practice.
Practice. Follow a routine. So one of the things that fascinates me about that is that practice doesn't mean I'll do it and I'm good at it and that's it. So when Tiger Woods was at his peak in 2000, 2001, 2002, he was practicing more than he's ever practiced. Yet he was the best in the world and he was better than anyone else by a long way. But he was still practicing, to illustrate that point. So these are routines that will develop those skills such that we can now counteract those. We now have we've got countermeasures to those problems. And John, where did that fit in?
It's the foundation for the entire process.
Yeah, trust is, and the foundations, exactly, it's the foundation for the entire process. And then?
We get stability in outcomes.
Yeah. Better days. So if we're not going to it's not going to suddenly transition to that. But if we master the tiniest items of the highest importance, so we take the crane example and we go all the way through with it, then we'll have got to that point for cranes, for example. Steel erection, master a part of it, master the tiniest item of the highest importance, take it through there, then we'll get stability in that bit. It's not, you'll get stability as we master the tiniest items of the highest importance. So it's not all of a sudden going to happen, it'll happen wherever you aim to master the tiniest item of the highest importance and then take it through here.
Did you guys read, there's a lot in that statement right there when you think about seeing the work standards that we've got identified that we're working on. Because I think it's easy to go, holy cow, how did you pick those? They seem unrelated until you understand how we're trying to determine which things should be work standards, number one. And then number two, the goal isn't ultimately to build a standard for everything, right?
No.
We'll do more as we go, but there will be a point where you probably hit diminishing returns and we'll have to monitor that. So it isn't the, hey, we're going to write the manual of, how to go to the bathroom every day in a story way, right? So it's the right balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said.
I liked it too, because the work standards that have come out, I saw on a list, and I was having a little trouble in the beginning saying, well, how did somebody had a passion about this or that? That must be how we picked it. No, it's this. What are the force multipliers?
Yeah, exactly. Well said. All right. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? And this, by the way, will evolve. It will evolve. If we were to do the same drawing in a year's time, I suspect we might have learnt a bit more about this, and it will evolve as time goes on. The further we go this way, the more we're going to learn. For example, we've learnt a fair bit in the focus this week at Strand with steel erection. We've learned a fair bit about this, what that and how that can work in the construction environment.